Republican Senator Lindsey Graham is saying that his party has gone off the deep end.
Yesterday, at a dinner for the Washington Press Club Foundation, the South Carolina senator roasted the media, the GOP, and candidates in the White House race.
The mystery around Lindsey Graham's partner is one of those stories that just won't quit, mostly because he's spent his whole life in the spotlight without the traditional family setup people expect from a Southern politician. People have been whispering about his private life for decades, trying to find a face to put next to his in the frame. But the truth is usually a lot more complicated than the rumors. He's built a career on being the ultimate political wingman instead. For the past years, things are not going well with Lindsey, and his partner is in shock. Who's that partner? When you look at the political landscape of South Carolina, a state that prides itself on traditional family values, Graham is a massive outlier. He is a lifelong bachelor in a profession that treats a spouse and children like an essential campaign accessory. For years, the lack of a Mrs. Graham has fueled a low-humming engine of gossip that occasionally roars into the mainstream. Comedians and political rivals have often weaponized his single status, leading to viral and often unfounded rumors that he's hiding a secret life. But Graham has always met these nudges with a shrug, famously telling reporters, "If you're single, there's nothing wrong with you," and reminding everyone that there is no "single people need not apply" clause in the Constitution. What about the rumors of his sexuality? The senator has never publicly identified as gay or a member of the LGBTQ community. He has remained a lifelong bachelor, a status he defended during his 2016 presidential campaign by stating that there is nothing wrong with being single. Politically, he has consistently supported traditional marriage and frequently voted against LGBTQ rights legislation. Now, if you want to know the man better and deeper, you have to look past the partner people think they're looking for and look at the partner he actually chose, his sister, Darlene. His personal life was shaped not by a romantic whirlwind, but by a sudden, tragic responsibility. When he was just 21, his world was turned upside down. His mother died of Hodgkin's lymphoma, and just 15 months later, his father passed away from a heart attack. Suddenly, the young college student was the legal guardian of his 13-year-old sister. He has often noted that this period of his life, where he was essentially a surrogate parent while navigating the Air Force and law school, is a big reason why he never settled down in the traditional sense. During his brief 2016 presidential run, the partner question reached a fever pitch. People were obsessed with who would be the First Lady. Graham joked that he'd have a rotating First Lady, suggesting his sister or various friends would fill the role. It was a punchy way to deflect, but it also highlighted his reality. His closest bonds have always been familial or professional. He's admitted he came close to marriage once, early on, but the timing of raising a teenager and building a career just didn't align. Despite his openness about his past, the internet still loves a good mystery. The Lady G moniker, which trended on social media after a series of unsubstantiated claims by adult film stars and activists, is a prime example of the shock people feel regarding his private life. These rumors aren't just tabloid fodder, they're often used as a political cudgel by those who want to imply he is compromised or extortable, though no proof has ever surfaced to back those theories. Well, Graham is a man who seems to find his intimacy in the halls of power rather than at a dinner table at home. He's a political bachelor who has traded a traditional partner for a series of high-stakes alliances that keep him relevant, powerful, and, most importantly, in the room where the big decisions are made. But as he navigates a changing party, those professional partnerships are becoming more volatile than ever. Is his long-standing ability to pivot finally hitting a wall? Or is his new alliance just too much for his old guard to handle? The partnership with Donald Trump. To better grasp why people think things aren't going well, you have to look at the most intense partnership of his life, his alliance with Donald Trump. It's a relationship that has confused almost everyone. Back in 2016, Graham was the loudest voice in the room calling Trump a race-baiting, xenophobic religious bigot. Fast forward to April 2026, and he's arguably Trump's most aggressive supporter on the Hill, especially regarding the current military escalations with Iran. This shift isn't just a slight change in tone, it's a total structural overhaul of his political identity. He went from being the man who said Trump would destroy the Republican Party to the man spending his weekends at Mar-a-Lago, whispering policy ideas into the president's ear over a round of golf. In fact, it was during one of those very golf sessions shortly after the 2024 election that Graham reportedly first began pressing Trump to authorize the strikes on Iran that have come to define the start of 2026. This transactional bond has granted Graham massive influence, but it has cost him a lot of his old-school maverick credibility. In the early days of 2026, Graham has emerged as the chief architect of what the administration calls Operation Epic Fury, a military campaign aimed at crushing the Iranian regime. While Graham boasts to reporters that he and Trump are crushing their enemies and that he speaks with the president nearly every morning, the domestic surprise to this partnership is becoming harder to ignore. He has traded his reputation as a bipartisan dealmaker for a seat at the head of the war table, and that trade is starting to look increasingly risky as he heads into a primary season. The friction is visible every time he returns to South Carolina. Even as he launches his bid for a fifth Senate term in March 2026, he finds himself in a weird middle ground. He gets booed by the megabase at home for being a warmonger or establishment, yet his former moderate friends feel he's gone far too deep into the mega trenches to ever come back. Some polling in April 2026 suggests that nearly 30% of Republican voters might sit out the election specifically because of the foreign policy stance Graham supports, viewing it as a departure from the America First isolationism they were promised. It's a high-stakes game of survival that leaves everyone wondering who is really leading whom. Is Graham the Trump whisperer who uses the president to enact the hawkish foreign policy he's always wanted? Or is he simply a passenger on the Trump train, holding on for dear life to avoid being primaried? The reality is likely a bit of both. By becoming Trump's biggest Iran war booster, Graham has made himself indispensable to the administration's current military agenda, ensuring that he remains the most pro-war Republican out there at a time when the White House needs legislative cover for its strikes. But this partnership isn't just about missiles and carrier groups, it's about a fundamental reversal of his own words being used against him. Whether it's his flip-flop on Supreme Court vacancy rules or his total embrace of a man he once loathed, the reaction to the system is constant. He's now defending the strikes on Iran with the same fervor he once used to defend John McCain's honor. But the audience has changed. His current partner in this political dance, Donald Trump, is a man who demands total loyalty, and Graham has provided it, even if it means alienating the very voters who put him in office decades ago. As he navigates this 2026 re-election cycle, Graham is facing the sharpest terror of his career. He is currently calling on his GOP primary challengers, including Charleston attorney Paul Dans and furniture seller Mark Lynch, to fire staff over controversial social media posts, a move that highlights just how defensive his campaign has become. He is fighting a multi-front war, one in the Middle East, which he champions from the Senate floor, and one in the upstate of South Carolina, where his partnership with the base is looking more fragile by the day. Despite the unpopularity reflected in some recent polls, Graham remains a formidable survivor who has won dead heat races before. He is banking on the idea that in a time of war, voters will choose the veteran hawk over the unknown challenger. But as the 2026 primary approaches, the question remains, if his partnership with Trump can't save his approval ratings at home, what happens when the shock wears off? But before he was Trump's go-to guy, he was half of the most famous duo in the Senate. Did he lose his way when that ended? The partner in crime, the ghost of John McCain. If his current alliance with Trump is a high-speed chase, his two-decade partnership with the late John McCain was a long-haul journey in a battle tank. For 15 years, you rarely saw one without the other. They were the Senate's odd couple, the fiery, short-tempered war hero from Arizona and the quick-witted, folksy lawyer from South Carolina. They traveled the world together, making nearly 50 overseas trips to war zones and international summits, often acting as a shadow State Department. Critics and fans alike called them partners in crime, a nod to their shared habit of bucking their own party to push for a more interventionist foreign policy, or to draft bipartisan Gang of Eight bill on immigration. The meeting of these two was as cinematic as their friendship. They first crossed paths during the push for President Bill Clinton's impeachment, where Graham, then a House member, was presenting the case to the Senate. McCain later joked that he knew Graham was the kind of guy he wanted to spend time with the moment Graham told the Senate, "Where I come from, any man calling a woman at 2 a.m. is up to no good." From that point on, they were inseparable. Along with former Senator Joe Lieberman, they formed a group they called the Three Amigos, a trio of hawks who were often the only ones in Washington demanding more troops in Iraq or stronger stances against dictators. McCain wasn't just a colleague. He was Graham's political North Star and personal mentor. Graham described their bond as something closer to brothers, admitting that while McCain could be an asshole one minute, he was your dearest friend the next. Their desks in the Senate were right next to each other, a physical manifestation of a partnership that dominated the Republican foreign policy landscape for an entire generation. Graham has often recalled their travels to every crap hole you can go to, including war zones where McCain would insist on being where the action was, almost as if he missed being shot at. But when McCain passed away in August of 2018, the effect to Graham's system was profound. The partner in crime was gone, leaving Graham as a solo act for the first time in his senior Senate career. It's a loss he still feels daily. He's noted how difficult it is to look at the empty desk next to his on the Senate floor. Literally, some of the last words McCain said to him were, "I love you. I have not been cheated," a reference to the full life the senator had lived. Graham promised to give him the send-off he deserves, but the political vacuum left behind was impossible to fill with sentiment alone. Without McCain's conscience to anchor him, Graham began to drift toward a new center of gravity. The transition was jarring to the public. Within months of McCain's funeral, where Graham had been a grieving pallbearer, he was fully embracing Donald Trump, a man who had famously mocked McCain's military service. Many of McCain's former staffers and family members watched in disbelief as Graham seemingly traded his old partner's maverick principles for a seat at the table of the man who had been McCain's fiercest critic. While Graham defended the move by saying McCain taught him that the country must move forward after elections, others saw it as a chameleon-like pivot to survive a shifting GOP. By April 2026, the absence of McCain's influence is more visible than ever. While Graham still invokes his old friend's name when arguing for military intervention in Iran, the partnership has shifted from a shared moral crusade to a calculated political survival strategy. He claims that he is being helpful to Trump because the president needs all the help he can get, a role that McCain likely would have rejected. The thing isn't just that McCain is gone, but that Graham has managed to survive and even thrive by becoming a completely different version of himself. He's no longer the sidekick to the Senate's conscience. He's the lead strategist for a new, more volatile era where he serves as the primary war booster for an administration McCain once loathed. But is this shift a betrayal of his old partner, or just a masterclass in the art of the political pivot? Some argue that Graham's current path, pushing for Berlin Wall moments in the Middle East, is the ultimate realization of the hawkishness he and McCain shared, just stripped of the bipartisan maverick branding that made them famous. He is now the Trump whisperer, using the president's ear to achieve the military outcomes he spent decades traveling the world with McCain to promote. Whether McCain would approve or be in shock himself is a question that haunts Graham's critics every time he takes to the airwaves to defend the new status quo. The family man you don't see. Why is Lindsey Graham such a survivor in the political arena? One must focus on the impact that defined his early life, a series of events that forced him to become a partner to his own family long before he ever set foot in the Senate. Growing up in central South Carolina, Graham's world revolved around a small business called the Sanitary Cafe, a combination pool hall, bar, and liquor store owned by his parents, Millie and F.J., the Dude Graham. It was here, amidst the smoke and the click of billiard balls, that a young Lindsey learned his first lessons in human nature. He famously once remarked that, "Everything I learned about Iranians, I learned working in the pool room," claiming that dealing with pool sharks taught him how to spot a liar from a mile away. But the blue-collar stability of the sanitary cafe was shattered while Graham was an undergraduate at the University of South Carolina. Within a span of just 15 months, both of his parents died. His mother from Hodgkin's lymphoma at age 52, followed shortly by his father, who suffered a fatal heart attack at 69. At 21 years old, most college students are focused on their next exam or their first job. Graham, however, was suddenly left as the primary provider and protector for his 13-year-old sister, Darlene. This wasn't just a temporary role, it was a total life realignment that saw him return home every single weekend from college to be with her. The commitment to his sister became the defining partnership of his young adulthood. To ensure she was taken care of, Graham made a calculated move that would shape his entire career. He enlisted in the Air Force and later legally adopted Darlene so that she could receive his military benefits and have the security of a stable guardian. Darlene has since described this period as the ultimate proof of her brother's character, noting that while they lost their world, Lindsey assured me that he was going to take care of me, and he was going to be there for me. This surrogate parenting role, balancing law school, military service, and raising a teenager, is largely why the partner role in his life was filled by family rather than a spouse. By the time he entered politics in the early 90s, Graham was already a man who had mastered the art of managing a crisis. He had been a legal guardian, a military officer, and a hometown city attorney. When critics today look at his political pivots and wonder why he seems so comfortable in the midst of a shocking controversy, they often miss the fact that his formative years were spent navigating the literal life and death stakes of family tragedy and military law. For Graham, a partner isn't just someone you share a house with. A partner is someone you protect, someone you fight for, and someone you use to anchor your own survival. But as he moves into the new year election cycle, his ability to keep his political family together is being tested like never before. With no sister to raise and no military commander to report to, he is facing a new kind of isolation, and his current partners in Washington might be more volatile than any pool shark he ever met in Central military life. After earning his law degree, Graham's military journey kicked off in 1982 when he joined the Air Force JAG Corps. He started out on the defense side but eventually moved to Germany, where he spent 4 years as the top prosecutor for the Air Force in Europe. One of his early claims to fame actually came in 1984, when a 60-minute segment featured him defending a pilot. Graham's work helped blow the whistle on the military's flawed drug testing methods at the time. After leaving active duty in 1989, he didn't just walk away from the uniform. He transitioned into the South Carolina Air National Guard and later the Air Force Reserve while balancing a civilian legal career. When the Gulf War broke out in the early 90s, he was called back to duty to prep pilots on the laws of engagement. This part of his record actually sparked a bit of a surprising controversy later on, when critics questioned if he was inflating his resume. Graham was blunt about it, clarifying that while he served during the conflict, he was never a combatant or a war hero and had never been deployed to the front lines during that specific era. His rise through the ranks continued, eventually leading to a White House ceremony in 2004, where George W. Bush promoted him to colonel. It wasn't without a few legal hiccups, though. He tried to serve as a military judge while sitting in the Senate, but the courts eventually ruled that holding both roles was a conflict of interest. Even as a high-ranking senator, Graham made sure to get his boots on the ground. Between 2007 and 2014, he pulled several short-term active duty stints in Iraq and Afghanistan, focusing on prisoner detention and rule of law issues. These efforts eventually earned him a Bronze Star. After 33 years of balancing the courtroom and the Capitol, He finally hit the mandatory retirement age in 2015, hanging up his uniform as a colonel, a role that, interestingly enough, he performed without taking a military paycheck while he was serving in Congress. The survivalist. As we move into the next few months, the question of whether things are going well for Lindsey Graham has shifted from a quiet whisper in the halls of the Senate to a thunderous debate across South Carolina. For the first time in over 20 years, the man who has survived every political shift imaginable is facing a shock that his usual pivots might not be able to fix. He is currently running for a 5th term, and while he's always been a lightning rod, the current year's cycle feels different, more crowded, more aggressive, and defined by a military landscape that has many of his constituents on edge. The primary field against him has exploded. As of the filing deadline on March 30th, 2026, Graham isn't just facing 1 or 2 fringe candidates. He's looking at a multi-way Republican primary set for June 9th. Among the most formidable challengers are Paul Dans, a former Office of Personnel Management Chief of Staff and prominent author of Project 2025, and Mark Lynch, an appliance executive who has poured significant resources into the race. These aren't just names on a ballot. They are symptoms of a growing rift in the Republican Party. While Graham has positioned himself as the chief architect and cheerleader for the current war with Iran, even sporting a Make Iran Great Again hat during a February 2026 visit to Tel Aviv, his opponents are successfully framing him as a warmonger more interested in regime change in Tehran than the price of gas in Spartanburg. This is the ultimate survival test for Graham's partner in shock narrative and strategy. He is banking on his proximity to Donald Trump to shield him from the base's anger, but the base itself is increasingly fractured over the administration's military goals. While Trump remains popular with the core Republican electorate, a March 2026 AP NORC poll found that 60% of U.S. adults believe the military action in Iran has gone too far. Graham has leaned into this friction, praising Trump's April 2026 address on the war as the best speech I could have hoped for, even as gas prices remain a painful point of contention back home. His challengers, specifically Mark Lynch, are seizing on this, portraying Graham as the hawk in the president's ear, who is leading the country toward another endless conflict. Graham's response has been classic Survivor Lindsey. He is using his massive war chest, having raised nearly $20 million as of early 2026, to flood the airwaves and drown out his critics. He has even gone on the offensive against his primary rivals, calling on them to fire staff over past social media controversies, a sign that his campaign is in a state of high-alert defensive posturing. Yet, the numbers suggest he is in a genuine fight. While some prediction markets still show him as an 81% favorite to win the nomination, recent polling is more alarming. A public policy polling report from late 2025 showed him leading a generic Democrat by only 2 points, and an April 2026 market analysis suggested that up to 30% of Republican voters might sit out the general election specifically because of Graham's hawkish foreign policy preferences. The headline of 2026 is that Graham's greatest strength, his ability to adapt to whoever is in power, is being used as a weapon against him. His opponents call him a chameleon with no core principles, while he argues that his only core is the security of the United States. He is currently facing Dr. Annie Andrews on the Democratic side, a pediatrician who is already outpolling him in some early hypothetical matchups, leading him 47% to 42% in a March 2026 Impact Research poll. Andrews is running a campaign focused on being a mainstream alternative to Graham's perceived volatility, hoping to capture those disaffected MAGA voters who are tired of the war. In this environment, Graham is fighting a multi-front war. one in the Middle East, which he champions from the Senate floor as a moral necessity, and one in the South Carolina primary, where he is trying to prove he is still the partner the Republican Party needs. He is gambling that in a time of active military conflict, voters will choose the veteran statesman over a political newcomer. But with his approval rating sliding and the shocked partner moniker becoming a meme for his chaotic alliances, the year is shaping up to be the year we find out if Lindsey Graham has finally run out of partners to hide behind. Whether he survives June or falls to a primary shock, the story of the present isn't just about Graham. It's about a Republican Party that is trying to decide if it wants to be the party of McCain's ghosts or the party of Trump's new war. And as always, Lindsey Graham is right in the middle of the fire, insisting that everything is going exactly according to plan. The ultimate wingman story. As we look toward the June 2026 primary and the general election beyond, the story of Lindsey Graham remains a masterclass in the art of the political pivot. Whether or not things are currently going well depends entirely on which version of Graham you are looking at. The maverick of the past, the Trump whisperer of the present, or the war hawk of the future. For over 30 years, Graham has managed to stay in the center of every major national conversation by finding a partner whose shadow could provide him with both cover and influence. His legacy is one defined by these high-stakes associations. From the early years with John McCain, where he built a reputation as a principled internationalist, to his total realignment with Donald Trump, Graham has proven that he is the ultimate political chameleon. In 2026, he has everything he has ever sought: the ear of the president, a leading role in a major military conflict with Iran, and a massive campaign war chest to defend his seat. He is currently the chief architect of what he calls a moral necessity in the Middle East, even as he navigates a primary field that views his interventionism with deep suspicion. But the amusement to his system is becoming harder to ignore. His approval ratings in South Carolina have fluctuated wildly, and for the first time in his career, he is facing a serious challenge from within his own party, candidates like Paul Dans and Mark Lynch, who argue that his era of endless wars must come to an end. Even as he brokers potential diplomatic breakthroughs with Tehran from his position as an elder statesman, his domestic standing is under fire from a base that often boos him at the very rallies he attends to support the president. Graham's story is about the cost of survival. He has traded the Maverick brand for the MAGA shield, and in doing so, he has remained one of the most powerful men in Washington. Whether he wins a fifth term or falls to the shifting winds of his party, he will be remembered as a man who raised his sister, served his country for 33 years in uniform, and never met a political partner he couldn't adapt to. He once said that his only goal was to be in the room where it happens. This time, he is still in that room, but as the door begins to close on his long career, the world is finally seeing the man behind the partner. Whether the effect of his latest pivot is too much for the voters of South Carolina remains the final unwritten chapter of his long political life. What do you make of Graham's story? Do you think his partner is just hiding in secret? Let's hear from you, and if you want more content like this, subscribe to the channel.